Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this planet, in whatever time zone. Welcome to AWS On Air, part of the AWS reInvent conference. My name is Sebastien. I'm live in Paris. I have my colleagues Alex on that side, live from Milano. On that side, I have Richard, developer advocate, live from Boston. And on, that's more difficult, that one, Timir, product manager for CloudShell, because today we are going to talk about AWS CloudShell with the team behind CloudShell. Alex and me, we have a couple of questions for you guys. You're going to show a demo as well. We are live, so it means you can ask questions too. There are two ways to ask us questions. You can send us a question on Twitter, AWS On Air on Twitter. We are going to monitor that one. Sorry, it's the end of the day for me. And in the comments, in the chat section of Twitch, if you're watching us on twitch.tv/AWS, drop your question there. We are going to keep an eye on that as well. So Timir, Richard, thank you for being with Alex and me tonight or this morning. And first, what is the problem that customer told us they have? What is the challenge they have that we are trying to solve, that we are trying to address with AWS CloudShell that has been announced by Werner yesterday in the keynote?
So I think there's, first of all, thanks for having us. And we should acknowledge that there's a larger team than just Richard and I behind this. So that's the first obvious call out. But yeah, CloudShell we built for a variety of reasons. We have obviously customers who say, I can't install software locally, and that makes the CLI hard for them to use. We have people who want to just play around with a quick shell, use the AWS CLI quickly to run a quick task, do some log diving. People who don't want to configure anything locally, which totally makes sense if you have your laptop perfectly dialed in. You want an ephemeral environment. We also have, we have to recognize that AWS is, people love the CLI and a lot of users use that. Mm-hmm. So it seemed natural to give them a place to do that with an easy way to use and consume the CLI, right? It's pre-authenticated. So whatever you log into the console with, you get those credentials passed through the shell. You don't have to manage credentials locally or manage keys, locally. So it's really a one-click experience, super convenient, and a great way to do tasks that are potentially cumbersome in the console. Like, I don't know, say you wanted to change permissions on 100+ S3 buckets, right? So this is where the CLI comes in handy, and this is where having something like CloudShell available at your fingertips comes to play.
Yeah, that makes sense, Timir. And as a developer myself, I was pretty excited to see the announcement. I can imagine 100 different things I would use it, but could you please tell us more about some of the interesting use cases that CloudShell unlocks for our customers?
Sure. The CloudShell comes with several tools pre-installed and several CLIs. So the AWS CLI comes with the serverless application model, or SAM CLI, installed, which is a super easy way to get started building serverless applications. And let's not forget that at the end of the day, it's also a general purpose shell. So if you want to write bash scripts or do other kinds of scripting, that's a great place to do it with just a click of a button. But I think the real use case there, as we talked about before, is consuming the AWS CLI. So this could be things like we talked about earlier, doing some log diving, changing permissions on things quickly, getting a feel for new services. I know that, during reInvent, of course, we have so many services that are released, and I'm always anxious to play with them. So there's an easy way to do that now with the CLI available in the console.
But it's a real full shell, as you said. So I'm inside a Linux environment. I assume it's Amazon Linux, which is there too. And what type of other command? I can install really any Linux command line tool there and bring them and create my own development environment or administration environment inside AWS CloudShell?
Yeah, it has, because AL2, you get a lot of whatever's prepackaged with AL2, but you also have Python 2 and Python 3 are both there. Python 3 is the default. We brought in Python 2 because we recognize a lot of customers are still using Python 2 and they haven't completed that migration yet. The Node runtime is also present. And like you said, because it's a regular Linux shell, you can use yum install and install any packages that are available through the yum package manager, like the Linux EPEL and those various package managers. And it also supports like a bash RC, like a profile, so that you can have it kind of run some like pre-initialization script. I know developers are very finicky about how their bash profile is set up, so I expect a lot of people will be copying and pasting a lot of bash profiles into their CloudShell over the next few days.
Yeah, so we'll mention a couple of times the idea of credentials, and maybe we want to talk about how we handle security. And as a developer, I'm used to having like profiles and credentials on my laptop, and that's always in some cases could be an issue, or could be something I don't want to have, or maybe I handle multiple accounts. So how does that work with CloudShell?
You want to go ahead and take that, Richard?
Yeah, I can take this one. So like any other AWS service, we expose API operations. We control access to those. We allow customers to control access to those via IAM. So we're deeply integrated with IAM. You can deny or enable actions via IAM. And the way that this works is that when you're logged into the console, you have some set of credentials that are, when you're in the console, you have a set of credentials that are typically in like a browser cookie. I'm not sure like mechanics, like specifically deeply familiar with how the credentials work while you're in the console itself, but it's some kind of like a browser cookie that you use to sign requests that come back and forth from AWS. And we use those same credentials for the CloudShell operations. So anything you could already do in the console in terms of listing buckets, updating operations on buckets, reading entries in Dynamo, creating Lambda functions, anything that you could do in there, you could do inside of CloudShell. So CloudShell is not going to give you the ability to do anything you didn't already have the permission to do. It's going to allow you to automate some of those actions via something like the AWS CLI or one of our SDKs.
Alex asked about the profile. Is it possible to add another profile as well, just like we do on our laptops?
I'm actually not sure about that. So on laptops, it gets a bit tricky. So what would happen is typically, like the typical developer workflow is that you've got your credentials file, which has all your very secret stuff in it, or almost nothing. And then you've got your config file, which says, I use this particular role with this profile. I use this particular role in this region and this format for this profile. And that's what developers use for their CLI, their SDKs, to interact with the AWS services. When customers are using the console directly, typically they're federating in via some kind of an identity provider system or some kind of identity federation. So they're using AWS SSO connected to their IDP, their identity provider of choice, and that typically just kind of like dumps them into the console. And that inside of AWS SSO is where it has what the console equivalent of a profile on a developer machine, because it lists you have access to this role and this role and this role, and you select those. It's all graphical based because of the nature of the console. So the developer doesn't have to manage that anymore, and it can be centrally managed by whoever is managing the SSO instance, AWS SSO instance, saying who has access to what. So you don't have to worry about having the correct role name typed into there. If someone wants to change the role name because they need to rotate some credentials, or they need to do some reason for migrating to a different account, your end developers don't have to worry about that anymore, and you can centralize that effort onto a team that specializes in that, and eliminates a lot of this what we'd call undifferentiated heavy lifting from your individual developers.
So as a developer, when I enter into the CloudShell, I have the same permission as the one I have in the console. That's really a one-one.
Yes, exactly.
Role or same user, IAM user or role. Okay, great.
Yep, it's pinned to a, just to get into some specifics, it's pinned to the IAM principal. So when you assume a role, it is the combination of both the role and the session name. So typically if you're federating in via SSO, the session name is tied to your unique ID within your organization. So if Timir and I were both sharing the developer's role within our account, he would have a session that was like developer/Timir, and I would have a session, a principal named developer/Richard, so that I wouldn't be able to see or interact with his profile, and he wouldn't be able to see or interact with mine the same way it works in the console today.
That's pretty cool. So before we jump into a demo, because we have a demo, I wanted to ask a question that was just asked on Twitch. So live questions, guys. So Kiko is asking if there is any migration tool. Now, I'm not 100% sure what migration tool means, but I imagine.
I think you were referring to Python 2. I had mentioned some customers hadn't migrated to Python 2. Customers migrate at their own speed. We try to help as much as we can, but what we don't want to do is force a customer to migrate, because it would be easier for us to launch some feature. So if we know that a lot of customers are still using something that might be end of life or deprecated, we would love for them to upgrade and migrate to like a newer version. We will help them as much as we can, but we're definitely never going to say, well, I can't say never. We're definitely going to bias heavily against saying, if you want to use this, you must use the latest and greatest, because in your enterprise, in businesses, like, they have what works for them. They don't want to spend resources upgrading because we told them to. I think that's what the person in Twitch here, Keto2K, had meant by
I think you're
migrating. Right. Migration. Talking about migration, it means that when I'm using AWS CloudShell, I don't need to upgrade the CLI every week like I'm doing on my laptop. You're going to do that for me?
Yeah, we'll do that on a regular cadence. So we'll keep up with all the latest patching for you, and we'll update the Amazon Linux 2 image underneath, and any of the tools that we've installed for you in the image, we'll obviously keep those up to date and security patched. Anything you install with your, as Richard was saying earlier, with your sudo rights in the shell is your responsibility to keep up.
That makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And we'll talk about persistency in a second, but why don't we jump into this demo? So sure. Let's do it. Here we go.
So we're going to see that the shell is actually just a one-click, super easy thing. There's a little welcome screen, and you're in a shell. You can change font sizes and other preferences, which we'll come back to. Here we're going to see someone fetching the identity, which is our principal engineer, Fabian. We're going to see calls to the AWS CLI going into JQ, which is pre-installed there. Now we're going to see a quick SAM CLI demo. These are all super fast. So we're going to create a SAM app, a node-based SAM app. We're going to open another shell side by side, so we can follow the instructions and change the font size so we can get it all on the screen. So you can open up to 10 sessions into a Cloud Shell, so 10 tabs, if you will. Now we're going to see him build and deploy this SAM app, and it happens very quickly at the end, but you'll actually see a URL come out of this at some point, and you'll see Fabian connect to that URL to make sure that the app is actually functioning. So here's the deployment. Which takes a second, and now we have the URL value, and you'll see this hello world come back. The CDK is not pre-installed in the shell. We consider that an application dependency, so it's super easy to install yourself. You'll see Fabian do it in this demo. He'll use npx here, which will run this. It's a very quick demo. I apologize for that, but yeah, you'll see him installing the CDK and deploying. There you go, and there it is. He'll continue with this and check this, list the stats for this hello world application that he's just created. Yeah, so he's just here's another great use case, though. I won't tell you everything he's doing, but he's basically following the docs, the AWS docs, step by step. And I think that's another great use case for CloudShell. You just open the shell. You don't have to configure anything or set up permissions or do IAM things. As you can log into the console, you can get a shell. Typically, there's limitations to that which we can discuss. But this is a nice way of just following documentation. Here's an example of doing a quick log dive that shows uploading and downloading files. So he has a script that he uses to find slow calls. And will upload, and then he'll see that it's there, execute it. So this will return some values. He'll pipe it into a file. And then you'll see the download action. So there's a couple of actions in there that you can perform: upload, download. You can restart your shell, which gets you a new compute environment underneath at any point should you need that. There's actually another option there now in the release product, which is basically a it allows you to get out of a jam quickly. I'll explain that in a second. Mm-hmm. This is showing how you can install software on the shell. He's installing a Midnight Commander. We don't necessarily recommend this. This is where you can get into a little trouble. So make sure if you're going to go this route, installing software via your bashrc file, that you include that -y in the yum command. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you'll have to use the feature that we added. So, and again, I'll explain that in a second. So now he's restarting the shell to prove that the installation happens when the bashrc is executed. And you'll see that come back in a second. And it should have Midnight Commander installed. Yes, it does. Great. And that's the end of it. I just want to finish that discussion about ending on that piece. If you make a mistake in your bashrc file, or you get into a login loop, or you feel like there's some unrecoverable thing, or you just want to get rid of the data you have in CloudShell, we've added a delete your home directory option in the final product. So obviously use that with great caution. You will be asked to confirm that choice when you run it. But if you do get into a problem there, typically either restarting the compute, or if in the worst case scenario, you have the option to remove whatever might be offending the offending file by just deleting your entire home directory. But be aware, it will remove everything, the entire contents of your home directory. So use it as a last resort.
I imagine so, yeah. So using AWS CloudShell, I don't need to provision an EC2 instance just to do command line work. I don't need to provision a Cloud9 environment, for example.
But we'd like you to provision a Cloud9 environment.
Which also is based on EC2. Someone, Leveloop Josh on Twitter, is asking if we can call it like a subset of Cloud9. It's just the shell part of Cloud9. It's not the IDE part.
It's slightly different. I think it's fair to conceptually think about it like that. Absolutely. Just in, like you said, Sebastien, about having just the terminal part of Cloud9 there and none of the visual file tree or the sort of syntax highlighting and editing and all that. I think there's differences in the underlying images. Cloud9 has a bit more customization to the underlying image or AMI that runs that. And of course, Cloud9 currently runs on an EC2 instance. So yeah, I mean, there's minor differences, but anything that you can do typically in the Cloud9 terminal, you should be able to do in CloudShell.
I would add, if you don't mind, Timir, that if you are developing an application, it's probably more likely that you would want a full IDE, while if you just need a terminal to download a large file or to monitor the status of a deployment, or just something that you're more comfortable doing in the CLI instead of in the console or somewhere else, I think CloudShell works pretty good for that.
Yeah, it's not a development environment.
For sure. I think if you're at a point where you're comfortable editing with a text-based editor, whether that's Nano, Vim, or Emacs, whatever your poison is, then CloudShell is a great place to go. But as soon as you need to do sort of multi-file type things, it seems to me that Cloud9's a better option.
So you show that we can install our own package and we can restart the environment and still get access to whatever we install. It means there is some kind of persistence layer. So how long it will persist? How much data can I put there?
So yeah, it's a great question. So obviously, Amazon is built on the concept of regions. We give you 1 gigabyte of persistent storage per region. And that storage is not arbitrary. It's always your home directory, which is persisted. So you can't choose what files are persisted or not. Those files on a regional basis in your home directory are persisted for up to 120 days. Don't worry, we don't remove it all after 120 days. It just means that on a regional basis, if you don't access the shell for that period of time, we'll get rid of it, assuming that you don't want it anymore. If you want to prevent that from happening, all you need to do is just go start a shell. It's super easy. Just wait for it to start, see the prompt, and then you can exit, and then you have another 120 days to wait.
So I think, guys, we just found another feature of the CloudShell. It can actually help you get out of Vim because you can restore the environment. So customer requests.
Escape, Q, exclamation point.
Exactly. I also wanted to ask you, Richard, about the accessibility and the customizations we can do with the terminal.
Sorry, we briefly saw that in the demo where we saw, I think Fabien had reduced the font size, but you can also increase that much larger. There's the ability to change the theme. I think it comes with a dark theme, but you can change. There's a couple others that are included by default. And as you saw, he had included Midnight Commander, which is a theme tool. So if you have a preferred shell-based theme or accessibility tool, it should directly work. And I say should. If someone finds like an accessibility tool that they're using with a shell and it doesn't work, feel free to let us know. There will be some contact information available either in the Twitch chat or wherever this is being broadcast out to the world. We'd love to hear that feedback to make this a better product. I mean, and we think it has good accessibility features. We know that, there's always room to improve. So we'd love to hear what customers have to say about that.
Can we take this question to you guys?
Yeah. There is this is live byte asking if it supports that, etc. What is the shell by default?
So Bash is shell by default. There's also, I should have mentioned, and I apologize. There's also PowerShell installed, and Z Shell is pre-installed as well. And actually, I'm an Oh My Z Shell user, so I set that up as well. So I have all these silly themes because I have the random settings set up. But yeah, it works great with Z Shell. Works great with Bash. Whatever your, like we said, whatever your choice is, it should work. So.
So there is some compute resource at stake there. There is some storage as well. And usually when I'm asking a question about pricing, I say everything that costs us money as a price for customers. What is the price of AWS CloudShell?
We don't charge for AWS CloudShell. So you get, and it's a good question also about the compute. We should talk a little bit about that for a second. You get basically you get a laptop with 1 gig of disk and 1 CPU and 2 gigs of RAM. That's
per region.
At no cost per region. Yeah.
Per region.
Well,
So
I think we give them slightly more than that, right? I believe the container itself has roughly 15 gigs of storage. Only one gig in your home directory persists. So you can use that other 15 gigs like in that session. It'll just be thrown away. So on air right now, I have just upgraded everyone's CloudShell from the 1 GB that Timir was offering to now they get 16 with 1 gig persisting.
At no additional cost.
At no additional cost.
Is there any data transfer cost if I'm sending data in and out the region?
Yeah, so data transfer is billed at standard transfer rates for AWS, and those you can find on the website. Yeah, it would take me. I don't think I could explain it all to you. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, this morning I was downloading about 200 megabytes into the shell from an external website, and just to clarify, that would be free because we are bringing data into the cloud. And then I extracted and picked only a couple of files that I was interested in and downloaded it into my laptop. So that I would pay for because I'm getting data out of the cloud, right? Just to clarify what we mean. Cool.
Yep. Yeah, this can be very useful if you're running some kind of a script that's pulling some file from S3, a several gig file from S3, doing some processing on it, and then putting some processed version of it back. Even if you're only putting back a few hundred, a few megabytes, you're doing this over 10,000 files, which is why you're trying to automate it. It's significantly cheaper to do it in the CloudShell because it's not leaving the AWS data center to come to your laptop and then going back. You can do something like, I think that we touched on this a bit earlier, is that you could do something very similar with Cloud9 because it would also be in the region. You wouldn't have to worry about that. But sometimes you don't need the whole IDE stack for that.
That's great. Looks super cool. Shell access from one click in the console in multiple regions for free with 1 gigabyte of storage. Anything we should encourage our customers to do? Maybe just try it.
Try it.
So click
and of course, let us know what you think. We want your feedback is what makes our product better. So as Richard pointed out earlier, whether it's accessibility or anything else, let us know. I don't know how we are going to communicate the contact here, but reach out any way you can.
There are many ways to bring feedback. It can be through the support menu on the right side of the console, in the AWS Developer Forum for all the developer-related questions, or you can reach out to Alex. Reach out. I was reading my name, Sebastien. Me directly over social media. We will bring feedback to the diverse product team. Thank you very much, Timir, Richard, for answering the question, for showing the demo. We have a couple of additional comments that arrive on Twitch about PowerShell is there.
That's actually a cool use case. Like, how do I run PowerShell if I have a Mac, or it's something I didn't think about. So thank you.
And someone else saying that OMA ZSH is great, so I agree. We are many to agree. Thank you for watching wherever you are on this planet. Next session in just 2 minutes, so stay tuned for the following of the program today. Timir, Richard, thank you. Alex, thank you very much, and see you soon, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.